Thank you all again for joining us today. In order to oppose war, racism, and exploitation, we must fight for the self-determination of all oppressed nations. Only the people of these nations can fully evaluate their society and be the true engines of progress there. As people in the US, we must take responsibility for the actions of this government, or in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the greatest purveyor of violence in the world, my own government. But as we've heard today, there is also a profound disparity between the narrative that we are given and constantly inundated with about Korea and the full reality on the ground. Last August, just before the Trump administration's travel ban took effect, I had the privilege of traveling with Anti-Coalition to half of Korea, to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or North Korea, something that is so cruelly denied to the countless separated family members in South Korea who may never see their loved ones again, solely because of the division of Korea that was imposed on them against their will by the US. Today I'd like to share some of the personal experiences that I had in the DPRK in order to help demystify it and offer some small window into what it is like to be there. We were there for 7 days and spent all our waking hours traveling throughout the country on foot or by car, meeting various friends, friends of friends, and contacts of our friend and guide, Professor Chung. He was born in South Korea and has traveled to the DPRK over 100 times, but now lives in China because doing so has caused him to be unable to travel back to South Korea. We met with workers, artists, veterans, soldiers, scientists, students, teachers, and farmers. We struck up conversation with people in public at every opportunity. We traveled throughout Pyongyang, which holds about a fifth of the population, south to Kaesong in the DMZ, west to countryside farming villages like Sinchon and Sariwon, and north to popular hiking and camping spots in the mountains. We were never told what to think about what we experienced, only to try and understand the perspective of the people there and put ourselves in their shoes and make up our own minds. What we found there was, in many ways, no different than anywhere else. People go to work, go to school, make friends, drink, play video games, make art, date, and raise families. Yet at the same time, it is also unique in many ways due to its historical context and its economic substructure. The DPRK is a socialist society, meaning that the means of production, like factories and farms, are publicly owned, and the economy is planned to most efficiently meet the needs of the people as a whole. Socialism is different in every country based on each country's unique material and historical determining factors. While the DPRK is often touted as an example of the failure of socialism, in reality, it shows the resilience of socialism and of the Korean people against seemingly insurmountable odds, namely the utter devastation of the Korean War and relentless attempts by the US to bring about regime change by any means, including military aggression and crippling sanctions. As renowned historian Bruce Cummings wrote in 2003, quote, "An internal CIA study almost grudgingly acknowledged various achievements of this regime: compassionate care for children in general and war orphans in particular, radical change in the position of women, genuine free housing, free healthcare, and preventative medicine, infant mortality rates comparable to the most advanced countries." The CIA and Bruce Cummings are by no means left-wing sources, but the reality of the DPRK's high standard of living is undeniable. The World Health Organization has consistently praised the DPRK, and in 2013, its Director General said, quote, "They have something that most other developing countries would envy." Indeed, everywhere we went, we saw healthy, vibrant communities. Parks and even roadside landscaping, instead of people being filled with people forced into homelessness, like we see here in one of the richest cities in the richest country on earth, were filled with people socializing, enjoying the weather, playing sports, or dancing. Communities are tightly knit, and everyone knows their neighbors, similar to what we see in places like Cuba. Many families have lived in the same neighborhoods for generations, some for centuries. There is a palpable sense of peace and calm, in spite of, almost in defiance of, the constant threats of war from the US. Trump's incendiary rhetoric had only intensified in the days leading up to our trip. While we were in the country, Trump made his notorious fire and fury remarks, a direct reference to the nuclear bombing of civilians in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We saw this overtly genocidal threat on a TV news broadcast while we were eating at a restaurant in the DPRK. While people in the restaurant stopped and took notice for a moment, they soon went back to eating, karaoke, and carrying on. Music, the arts, sports, and academics in general are major parts of life. Because of free access to education, people can pursue their talents and interests. There are many prestigious universities to which entry is based solely on aptitude. Free classes are also provided at the workplace or in local public study hall libraries, known as people's study houses, and gifted children attend advanced after-school programs. Because social crime in the DPRK is almost non-existent, unaccompanied children are an extremely common sight, even at night and in urban areas. This is not the result of over-policing, which only perpetuates cycles of violence, but rather the structure of the society, the meeting of people's needs, and the absence of the culture of violence that we see here in the US. Despite being depicted as a dystopian police state, I never experienced or witnessed any intimidation or harassment by state forces, or any fearful body language in the people around them, something that we see on a daily basis here. On the contrary, I saw things like small children playing in guard towers and soldiers doing public services like construction or farm work. Soldiers are viewed not as forces of authority, but public servants that are fully integrated into their communities. In a small roadside flower shop that we stopped at, I watched as a soldier tried to adjust an air conditioning unit and accidentally knocked over a flower arrangement that was resting on top of it. He tried to fix it, but couldn't. A shopkeeper saw and tried to fix it herself, but couldn't, and responded by playfully hitting him with her fists and berating him as he cowered and blushed. The DPRK is often depicted as a warlike society, but the experience of war only heightens the desire for peace. For most of us here today, war is an abstract concept. In Korea, living memories of the Korean War are everywhere. If you did not witness it yourself, your parents or grandparents did. While we were in Sinchon, we visited a man named Jong Song, who spoke with us about surviving the Sinchon massacre. His story is difficult to hear, but he wanted it to be known and remembered, so I will tell it for you now. US and Allied forces had occupied Sinchon in the winter of 1950, killing over 30,000 men, women, and children. During the last days of this massacre, Jong Song was captured along with several hundred other civilians. All of the men were taken into the woods and shot, all of the women were locked into one building, and all of the children were locked into an adjacent building, with no food, water, or heat. Over the course of a week, he watched as his friends died from starvation or the cold. As their captors retreated from Sinchon, they poured gasoline into these buildings through the roofs and set them on fire. Jong Song survived only because he was in the corner of the crowded room. He passed out from smoke inhalation, but lived. The next day, when he was rescued, he immediately ran to the other building to look for his mother, but none of the women had survived. He was one of only 3 children who did. Like everyone else, he spoke without animosity or judgment. He said only that he wanted people to know his story. People in the DPRK harbor no ill will against the American people. They know that war is not the fault of working and poor people here or anywhere. Rather, it is a systematic aspect of the social system here, capitalism and imperialism, imposed by those in power. They do not even separate the US imperialists from the Japanese imperialists. Both are manifestations of the system of imperialism itself. We were never treated with any hostility. Instead, people are quick to smile and quick to make jokes. People took us into their homes and treated us like family. Several people expressed that they were worried about us and asked about the impact of racism, racist police brutality, and gender-based violence in the US. Sure enough, upon returning to the US, one of us was detained by US customs agents for 3 hours. They were mocked, questioned, and intimidated while all of their belongings, including phone and laptop, were searched. This was not the first time this person had been treated like this by US customs agents, which is undoubtedly the result of the color of their skin. On our last night in the DPRK, one of our local hosts asked what we had thought about the trip, and a member of our group was explaining how her friends and family had been telling her not to go on the trip, that it was too dangerous, and that after her experience there, she was excited to tell her friends what it was really like. A local restaurant worker overheard her saying this and came and asked to give her a hug with tears running down her face. My point is not that the DPRK is a utopia. My point is that we should reject the racist caricature that we are fed, that in the preposterous notion and the preposterous notion that millions of people are brainwashed or acting, and instead listen to their voices and learn from them. We should defend their right, the right of all Koreans, and the right of all oppressed peoples to determine their own destiny without reservation. We have far more in common with them than with our common oppressors, those in power here in the US, who preside over the largest empire in human history, who despite their prattling clearly care nothing about the people of Korea or Flint, Michigan, or Iraq, or Libya. They are the ones we should struggle against, who we can and must struggle against, and the ones which we will win against, because they are severely outnumbered by us. Thank you.